Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to Moto Monday, and today we're going to be discussing, well, a bunch of topics. Honestly, we have a ton of things to unpack from the last week. We've got explosions of all different types, and really the world just asking what the hell is going on in the U.S. So, with that said, let's dive into some of today's topics. And before we get too far into it, I want to thank Rain City Tactical for being a huge sponsor of this channel. If you guys are in the Kent area of Washington, head over to the Rain City Shooting Center or go to raincityshoots.com or to raincitytactical.com to order your custom holster. Use code BFBN at checkout to get a discount. With that said, again, let's dive into today's topics. So the first one has to be Hawaii, right? With the whole blimp or balloon thing going on with China, apparently they're one of the DACI, recorded and rated satellites that China has was over Hawaii and was shooting like infrared lasers down. It's supposed to be more of a information gathering for scientific purposes, for like weather, geographical purposes, satellite. But why is it all the way out over Hawaii performing functions? That's what's kind of left to be talked about. This should be unacceptable. The fact that they're using high intensity IR lasers and shooting them down over Americans is insane. This has to be. I don't know why this isn't getting more coverage. Obviously, there's lots of things to unpack, and there's lots of things that are going on. Maybe this is just on the lighter end, but still, this is still a pretty big deal. So, I'm eager to see what more comes of this section. But yeah, this was one thing again that a lot of people don't even know that it even happened. So, I will let you guys know that it did. All right, next thing we're gonna move into is the 4 objects that have been shot down thus far. So we have the South Carolina coast, that first Chinese balloon that for whatever reason the Biden administration let travel all the way across our country, taking images over military bases, and then finally downed it over the internet, over national waters off the coast of Carolina. And they're still recovering it. Again, I have no idea why in the fuck that was allowed to happen, but it did, and that's what we're left with. So then we had, most recently, I'll move my way up the map. Most recently, February 12th, you had the item that was shot, or the object that was shot over Lake Huron. It was like a rectangular shape. It was the smallest of all the objects. They don't really know what it was. There was some like things hanging off of it, some like ropes or straps or something. So if it had a payload, it wasn't carrying it anymore. If it ever had a payload, we don't really know. Then we have, I'll jump up actually to the February 10th, February 11th, two objects that we don't know what they were. They were cylindrical in shape, about the size of a Volkswagen, had no propulsion systems really that could be seen by the pilots. The one thing I will note that I think is really interesting about this whole story is, especially the one that we were concerned with initially, the one in Canada was shot down over sea ice. When it crash landed, it broke into tons of pieces. But the most interesting part about that story, I guess, and it's kind of a two-pronged thing. One, that, and this will be like the preface, is that, we were even allowed to talk this early about the next thing, but, supposedly this object was able to scramble the radar systems of our F-22 fighter plane, which is like our most advanced 5th gen fighter plane that we fucking have. So it was able to basically escape its radar and tracking systems for its weapon system. So the fighter plane had to shoot it down manually. Now, why that's important? One, obviously that's a huge security concern, right? That's number one. Number two, with it being a huge security concern, why in the fuck is the U.S. government leaking that information or allowing for fucking CNN to break the news about it subverting our tracking systems of our, our our prized fighter. Like, why would we let anyone know, especially, I don't know, China or Russia or anyone else, that there is a system out there that can scramble and defeat our radar and tracking systems? Why would we announce that? Why on earth would we give anyone that bit of information? Right? Now, the caveat to it is maybe we said that and it's not true, giving maybe some false sense of security. But even at that rate, it's better to just not say fucking anything than it is to say that. Right? So that's the biggest issue with that whole scenario. Right? And so then, a day later, you have another one that's shot down that goes over in Canadian airspace. Trudeau ends up wanting to keep that one for their own studies and whatever else. And then, obviously, we already went over Lake Huron, but the one over Montana to me is the one that I am most interested in, because they shut down that airspace in a hurry, and we have the least amount of information coming out of that particular event. So I'm really curious to see what kind of unravels or what comes from that particular event, right? Another thing is, like, for whatever reason, like, they're keeping us so much in the dark, and I would really like to know why, because the more they keep things in the dark, the worse this is going to get for them, for everyone else. Like, there's so many questions being asked. Like, there needs to be some sort of answer coming. Supposedly, as well, China said that it's looking at, or it has potentially shot down something that flew into their airspace, and they're also reporting that we released like 10 balloons into their airspace. Blah 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 blah. I can't trust that fucking single thing that China says, so I don't think that any of that's true. I think it's possible that maybe they did shoot down something, right? Maybe we're not the only ones experiencing this new UAP phenomena with these, or I guess repeated UAP phenomena, because these things particularly match the identification of the pill-shaped objects that were being monitored off the coast, off the California coast, down near Coronado, by other Air Force and naval pilots. So, is this just more of the same thing? I guess, again, we're going to have to wait and see. I really think this could be that next narrative that they're going to use, like that's why we're all being kept in so much secrecy or whatever. This does remind me back to when they were talking about UFOs heavily, and supposedly Israel's former like space defense minister or whatever said that like the Obama and Trump and this administration have all known that aliens are real and they've existed on the planet for a long time, but they just haven't found a way to like actually warm up the public enough to actually talk about it. Maybe this is that event. Maybe they're just finding a way, like, oh, we happen to have this balloon. Oh, look to the skies. Oh, now we're going to like randomly scan the skies more, because today the White House said like, oh, maybe we should pay more attention to the skies. It's like, what the fuck? Like, how are you not actually, like, how is that even a comment you're making? Like, how stupid are you trying to make yourself sound? Like, how is our airspace, especially with how many flights we have going in and out every day from every single major city, how is, especially after like 9/11 and everything else has happened, how is airspace not something that you're fucking is a top priority? You know what I mean? Like, how does this even happen in the first place? We have NORAD, we have all these resources, yet somehow, we have all this aerial shit happening that we'd have had no idea was going on, or that we've even allowed to happen in the first place. Like, why? How did this balloon make it even like to Canada, like, and down like through the United States without like tons of warning or heads up? Like, if anything major was strapped to that, let's just say it was a nuclear device. Let's just say hypotheticals, right? Like, if it was detonated at a certain distance in the air, I mean, you're talking about an EMP that could cover hundreds of miles. And if there was multiple of them, like, now you're looking at a huge issue. Or, I mean, a large enough one, maybe it shuts down the entire American grid. You know what I mean? Like we go right back to early 1800s real quick, you know? Yeah, there is just so much going on in the world right now. It's hard to even think about anything else. I mean, right now, for example, there was a meteor that just burned up in the air over France, and I believe it's part of that gigantic meteor like cluster that's like going through its rotation around between us and Mars. And I think over the next 10 days, it's going to like come back past us. But yeah, there's just so much crazy stuff going on in the world right now, especially with this stuff. This is crazy, right? You had U.S. pilots shooting down stuff in objects in our airspace for the first time since World War II. In fact, it's funny actually. The fighter that shot down the first balloon actually got a fucking balloon and a spy satellite, like on his fucking plane, which I thought was pretty awesome. But another big thing to kind of discuss on this matter is, when we had high-ranking officials asked, if this was extraterrestrial or not, especially these two, the Montana event and the Northern Canadian and Alaskan event, they're not ruling anything out, which means that either they obviously know something, but they're intentionally being, very discreet about it. And we're just gonna have to wait and see why exactly that is. It would be interesting to see if it was in our lifetime that they actually talk about aliens being real. I think it's very possible. It's not out of the question. This would be a great way to warm up people in a slow way. Be like, oh, like things are slowly happening and slowly evolving, and like, oh, like I don't know. We'll just have to see. With that said, we'll move on from this topic. Again, we could talk about this in all sorts of different ways for a very long time, but I try to make these videos not go over too far. So let's move on to the last big topic from this week, which is the Ohio controlled chemical release from the train wreck. So this image is from East Palestine, Ohio. Can't make this shit up. There was a train wreck there, pun intended. And in the train wreck, there was a ton of chemicals that were used for the creation of PVC, which is a very, very highly toxic process. It's horrible, actually. It's one of the worst processes for any plastics out there. Now, this entire town had to evacuate due to this, and there was an explosion, and right now the burn that's happening is a controlled release of chemicals, which I find ironic and hilarious considering the administration's like, oh yeah, controlled release, like let all this shit in the air. I mean, literally, you can see in this photo, it's literally turning the sky like purple, and you have chickens and cows dying by the thousands, fish floating to the top of like rivers and lakes that are dying. Like, yet they're telling the people locally that the water's clean, you're good to go. Like, is it really? Like, would you fucking drink that water? Like, that's got to be worse than Flint, Michigan water, right? Like, you really gonna drink that? I know I'm not drinking that shit. Like, I'm not even going to Ohio. Like, fuck that. Like, who fucking knows what's going on with that shit? And I think it's pretty funny that, like, literally at the State of the Union address, you had Biden saying, like, oh, you should move to Ohio. Like, we're creating all sorts of great jobs out there that are super high paying. And then it's like, well, yeah, but you're also dealing with this. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that I think this is a pretty big deal, especially because they're considering, like, they want us driving electric cars because they're worried about emissions, but they're gonna just release, however many tons of the worst chemicals. Like, someone was talking about the actual chemical breakdown and the different chemicals that go into the creation of PVC, and some of them are similar to like mustard gas. Like, you could end up with a similar combination, which I don't know if you know anything about mustard gas, but it's pretty nasty stuff. Just ask anybody who's around in any of the world wars. So, with that said, yeah, it's crazy the amount of sheer chaos that is happening all at once, all over the world, but specifically here in the U.S. I mean, it doesn't seem to be stopping. The last thing I'll hit on tonight is just there was also a House committee hearing that Jim Jordan's was heading, and they talked about the standing up of a bunch of different committees that are going to be looking into basically the Justice Department, and then every side factor to I would say most of the 3-letter agencies. And I'm really glad that the ATF was mentioned on there as well. So look forward to what's going to happen this week and the rest of the week. So I will see you guys tomorrow for Tactical Tuesday. Stay strong, stay loose, battle on. And if you bitch in your heart, it'll show.